Ladies and gentlemen, Willem-Jan Renger.
Hello, good afternoon. I do hope conference fatigue has not set in yet, and you can spare 15 minutes with me. What I'd like to discuss with you is a lot of learnings I took as head of innovation studio at HKU, Utrecht School of the Arts. And I must make a little confession. I don't consider myself into gamification, so I feel like a sheep in the lion's cage. So when I hear the roaring sound of your throats, I know what is happening. And the reason is that I feel that I have some critique on things I've seen in the gamification space, which is nothing you have done, but outside of that. I think what I felt difficult at the beginning was a strong reliability of gamification on extrinsic motivation, the badges, the points, the leaderboards. And the reason I have some critique in that is that I play in a different arena than you, most of you I think do. I'm not playing the corporate game. My arenas are healthcare and education and cultural heritage. And the first things I had to drop when working in that arena were things like competition, points, and badges. To give you an example, I've created game design solutions for people with depression and psychosis, which is quite a difficult group to design for. Currently I'm working on a project for people at their end of lives to design an experience where they reconnect with their loved ones to answer really difficult questions. I'm involved in a European project around citizen engagement for energy transition in one of the most difficult neighborhoods in Utrecht. So you can hear that's a different playing field in the corporate environment. So I'd like to run you through some of the learnings from that space and bring it into this arena. So at a point in time, I was designing a methodology to train teachers to become designers of playful learning experiences. And this, I had to give a name and decided not to name it gamification. So it became ludodidactiek, which was a stupid name because first of all you cannot translate it in English, we now discovered. And second, nobody had heard of it. The good thing was we could make it whatever we wanted because it didn't exist before. So it is whatever we call it. So that's ludodidactiek. And we have now a group of young people that are trained to be trainers. We are expanding in different realms. We've got a master's program running it. We do a summer school. We even wrote a book about it in Dutch, but the good news is it will be translated into English, and this event was a trigger in that process as well. So we've been quite busy, and I started out doing this in 1991 because I was a teacher and I had material in front of me that made me so angry I couldn't work with it, and I had to design. I designed a game to overcome that chapter, which was successful, otherwise I would not have stood here in front of you. So that was 1991. In the meantime, we created lots of tools and methodologies to be able to train teachers to become, let's say, playful learning designers. And this is one of them. We call this the game design of the playful design canvas, where on the left you would archetypically start out with your traditional aims, your learning aims and goals. But if you come to the middle, it becomes more gamey-like, and this is the actual play system you build. And then there's some extras. This one I particularly like. I call it the déjà vu box. So often I start with clients or with teachers to déjà vu. So you visualize up front what kind of behaviors you want to see from your learners and what kind of unwanted behaviors you want to avoid and make sure that it doesn't happen without telling people that they don't do it. Another one of the outcomes of doing lots of projects over the past 15 years, especially as I said in healthcare and education, is that a lot of the wrongdoings are not happening at the beginning of the process. Although, I must say, I strongly resonate with the speakers of this morning that advocated, let's say, rapid prototyping, something we religiously teach every one of our students in the game design course, using paper prototypes. Even if you're going to do digital games, start on paper. It's cheap, you can change it fast, and again and again. So this whole design methodology, the iterations that go with it, that's not the key problem in my experience. It goes wrong afterwards. And usually it breaks between, let's say, prototype and full scale-up. And monetization was mentioned as an example by Karen. That is where most of the times the real shit hits the fan. And I think it's partly due because lots of questions that are in this domain are asked too late. I often work with doctors that want to build an app and they are focused on their patient, they want to solve it, but they have no idea who eventually will be the entrepreneur that keeps this app alive, where it will be hosted, what is the revenue model that comes in, who will pay for it and how much, etc. And if you bring those questions at the beginning of the process, you're a bit of a party pooper. But you have to, because otherwise, here in between, I have a slide where you see a large pond and there's dead fish all over the pond. And these are all the wonderful prototypes that die in that pond. And many of my products are in the pond as well. And that, again, is not the real aim I want to talk about today. It's an ancient problem we are duplicating, especially when we deal with technology. And I call this the medieval Bible problem. When we started to do the first game design course in the Netherlands in 2001, 2002, we were, I think, as much enthused as you were on the possibilities of this new medium. So we religiously spinned in the world what we could do, made big promises, and we had this wonderful technology at our hands to do so. Powerful PCs, great 3D graphics, incredible animation techniques. But to cut a long story short, there's one key problem with that. In order to be able to create a game or technology-driven design, you need a team of experts. You need a good game designer. You need a very good programmer. You need a skilled animator. They need to be able to master tools that are incredibly complex. I don't know if you've ever opened up an animation package, but every time I see it, I'm thoroughly intimidated by the amount of buttons and the inexplicable use they have. So I think if you're not a trained animator, you'll find it incredibly difficult to make even the most simple animation. It takes that amount of skill. And we are at a disadvantage compared to some of the other media. There's a young guy in the Netherlands called Martin Garrix, and at 16 years old, he was a world-famous DJ. And the reason is he got tools in his bedroom that made him, empowered him to create dance tracks at a very high professional level. So in the music industry, there's a sort of middleware layer that facilitates even non-experts to make decent products. But in our space, many of the traits are still what we call high mastery. It's like learning to play the violin. It will take you 10,000 hours. So if it needs more than one trained professional, let's say 4 or 5, to create a product, it becomes expensive. And that's where the Middle Ages come in. It's like you write the Bible by hand, coloring in the letters with gold plate. And this is something we suffer from, whether we realize it or not. And I especially encounter this in the realms I'm working in, like education and healthcare. But I see some similar things now with VR, which is, again, climbing up the hype curve that was discussed earlier. It's as expensive or complex to make as a game is. But I see similar things in MOOCs. Do you know what a MOOC is? A massive online course environment. So there are institutions that record lectures like these in studios with all the bells and whistles, and then being able to send this around the world. But if you have to make a change, if something changes, and let's face it, in the field of knowledge development, things change rapidly, you have to go back and change the recording. And that is a very nasty process to do in the midst of the recording, so probably you have to redo it. Which makes most of these enterprises, like Egyptian tombstones with hammered in letters, it's very expensive to change and redo it. So how long will it take before it might become obsolete? So this is a nasty trait of technologies, that if you hammer content in it, it can become obsolete quite soon. It will be very expensive to change again. But another problem is, we also suffer from what I call the footprint challenge. So give me an example. Something might work for one problem. So let's say I'm in education and a teacher comes to me and he wants to solve a particular subject in physics. Can you make a game about this subject? Of course we can. And we can do it really well. And I think we can do it in a way that we can demonstrate and even measure impact. But this is just one subject. So what about all the others? So if I have found the money to create this one game on volcanoes or one physics principle, then there's a room bigger than yours filled with teachers to say, I want to, and this subject, and what about this subject, and what about this subject? A recent example, I was at a conference like this, a medical conference, and there was a chap and he showed me the latest in technology, which was about anatomy and the famous HoloLens. So as a medical practitioner, you could walk around a leg in the air and look at the ankle, and it could move, and you could see all the bits moving. It was absolutely lovely. But then there were a couple of people that said, that's nice, but there's more to the human body than just the ankle. And then we did some calculus, and he had received a lot of research money to build this one prototype with this one ankle. And if you extrapolated it across the human body, you could go to Mars for that money. So if you have a subject, and then create a prototype, and let's be cheap, let's do it for 20K, then it might be really tempting and look very promising, and then it's just a prototype. So you have to flesh it out. And if we use technology, my experience is that between the prototype and the product, there's a factor of 10 between them. Because usually we have to rebuild the code from prototype to product, because it has, due to the iterations, it's become polluted, and you best start again and make it stable, and make it modular, etc. So rebuilding your prototype, if it is technical, is the best thing to do. So then you've got one subject with a price tag that is still within reasonable amounts. But the problem is we have a domain, and there's so many subjects in the domain. And I ran into this issue again and again and again. Patient information on a certain disease. Can we not do it in animation? Oh yes, we can. Would it be more accessible? Yes. Would it lead to more adherence from the patients with the material? Oh yes. How many diseases do we have? And that's the question that people don't ask at the beginning of these projects. They get the funding, they build one, everybody gets infused, and then you do the disastrous math of extrapolating it across the hospital. And the end result is we have nothing. Or we need 220 million euros to do it for every disease in this hospital. And these are not fictitious figures. I did the math recently in a hospital nearby. So there's a massive scalability issue I'm facing again and again. And there is a deja vu here. Remember the 90s? We had HTML. At HKU, we trained students to program HTML. How funny was that? I think as HKU, we had a website containing 30,000 handwritten pages in HTML. We had a sort of internal game to find the page without a mistake. That was very difficult. It contained lots of staff that no longer worked with us and did not contain the staff that was working with us. It was a monumentous task to maintain. But then somebody invented CMS. Oh my goodness, what a revolution. Are we cherishing what that did to the World Wide Web? It was a monumental change because all of a sudden we could tackle the scalability issue and we could focus on the content and not on the code and not on the individual pages. So that was really, really good. It was the middle layer that we were discussing earlier. So it was no longer about the coding, but it was about the content. And then you still had to maintain it, but it became a far less tedious job. Like Martin Garrix with his, let's say, Garage Bands and Apple laptop with which he probably began his career. So, this problem is mainly connected to the situation where you create a one-off solution to a one-off problem. And the content in healthcare and much of the content in education is so complex that it's very tempting to start and create a one-off because you have a tailor-made combination of your gameplay and your mechanics to the content. And that's where we came from. We came from a game design background, not so much a gamification background. So we are in the artistic domain, we like to create one-offs. It's our DNA. But then we ran into this scalable problem again and again. So what is then the next step? And you have figured this out a long time ago with your platforms, is to get a bit more generic. But that is a hard thing to do for an artist to become generic. So it brought us to the recent search for templates. Can we not find a way to bridge the gap in this problem and combine the best of both? So if there's a limited budget, then do not go for a one-off. Is there some budget? No, then sort of. But is there a lot of budget? Then think about creating a template. But if there's a lot of budget and there's extended, the subject is not extended, and there's a massive user base, then you've got a unicorn project. You just do it and become rich. But these are rare, as unicorns are. So that is basically where my research team and I are now looking into is what could be templates if we think along these lines and avoid this one-off pitfall of scalability. Well, there's an interesting story to it. It was triggered almost forced on us by a project we did in India, in Bangalore. We had to train 30 very smart Indian kids, you can see them here, and they had to be trained as play facilitators for schools, so they were not teachers themselves, they helped out other schools. And they were well versed in play, but not in game. So they had difficulty connecting the play. It was mentioned this morning, the play experiences, serious Lego play, etc. That's wonderful, but if you have strict learning goals to tick off, then playing with Lego will probably not lead you in that direction. So we need some rules to get them through those learning experiences that we need to sell to them. So rule-based thinking might help. So that's what we wanted them to train. We had 1 week with them. They had a bit of prior knowledge on play, and we thought we would never mention it, but the friend I did it with had promised in his project he would deliver 40 prototypes at the end of the week, working, which got us very nervous. So before we went, we thought, how can we shorten the learning curve of these people? We had to bring some templates for them to get an early start in their learning. So we created 3 stupidly simple mini-games to bring with us. One was existing, it's called Resolve. It's by a Dutch guy, we got his permission to bring it to India, for making little math sums. And you can change the objects and create lots of puzzles with a simple whiteboard stick you can write on. And we had created some of ourselves. This is a hexagon template that we brought with us. And oh, did indeed it shorten the learning curve. By Wednesday, we were sitting in our hotel rooms, frantically creating new slides because they completely went through the roof in terms of the learning curve. So that was quite a good success. What we ended up with was a series of little games that were not much fun in themselves, but then we created this big game canvas, so they created an epic story to connect these various sub-bits into a meaningful whole. And this was a golden bullet. So even if they had created small games, they could still wrap it up into a meaningful context and present something decent at the end of the week. And boy, did they surprise us. We had a little restaurant, which we call Food for the Brain. Lots of people came from outside to have a taste of their games. And they did really, really well. So this was one of our first early successes with the template line of thinking. This is another example, unfortunately in Dutch, but you can find it online if you want to. Here I created a workshop for teachers in Old Greek and Old Latin. And they wanted the template as well. And I'd never done anything in that realm. So what I ended up doing was taking the myth of Prometheus and create a text-based escape room. And in between, you can unlock the mythology of Prometheus, so you can go through the story, but in between it will log out and say, oh, there's a hiccup in the road, you have to do an assignment. And then the teacher could give them an assignment, and if they did it right, they got a code and they could progress. And in the end, I created this lovely wooden box of Pandora, and the final team meeting the finish line could open it and unleash the plagues on humanity as the mythology prescribed. And I've never seen teachers of Old Greek and Old Latin run through a room with red cheeks trying to get the code before their neighbors. So this was quite successful. The best bit was I did this on a Saturday because they had a teacher training day. And on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday I got clips and movies from classrooms where they decided to test it out in their classrooms. And the feedback they got from their learners was incredible. So the learners had said, oh, this is great, do you have more? So sort of emailed me and said, do you have any more templates lying around by any chance? Which the answer was no, because it was recent work. But there's a clear demand for this, I can tell you. And the last example is the most exotic, I think. This is my recent project I did over summer. This wonderful professor is called Krista Ande. She is a professor in theology, and her life's work is about contrast experiences. So these are changes in your life that will forever change the course of your life. This can be falling in love, getting a child, also losing your loved one, or losing a child. So that's very profound material. And she created a textbook and did sessions with groups of 5 to 8 people to discuss these life changes in a very specific way. It was almost in a sort of protocolized way. And she, through somebody else, she came to me and said, could you turn this into a game? And I said no, because I thought I couldn't. But after some discussion, we really got into some interesting area. And we ended up creating a game. And it is a game to bring 5 or 8 people that have had these kind of experiences, they don't even have to be the same, to bring them around the table and open up the box and then let them go, and they will have the most profound conversation you've ever witnessed. So that's a different kind of gamification for you. And I've let go of many of my design principles. It's not about fun. It can be about meaning. It's not about points and badges. It's about life. It's about loss. It's about connecting. It's about intimacy. It's about vulnerability. So these are the kind of mechanics I like to work with nowadays. And it's opening up a wealth of possibilities. So I invite you all to consider going into that realm as well. Because there's more to gain than just the very good cause of getting performance out of your employees. So, my main message is that although I'm fond of technology, and I love it to bits, and I'm thrilled by the possibilities of VR, in many situations, also with clients, I've withdrawn from technology. Because also this game was a paper prototype. But if you finish your paper prototype and it works, you've got your product basically. It was sent to a graphic designer, polished it up a bit, and it will ship in March in a box. And if we had done something like this in some kind of technology, I think the price would have been tenfold, scalability issues would have been massive, and it probably would not have seen the light of day because funding in this realm is very difficult. So technology is not always good. Paper prototyping is a must. Iteration is your best friend. What a wonderful day to share with you. Nobody got to my throat as a lion, which I'm very grateful for. And I hope you have a very good day today and next day. Thank you very much.